It is May 15th, 2026, and there are a few things to talk about, but I want to kind of just bring up something right away. I talked about this. If you're watching the pre show, I posted a video about this. It's 22 minutes. 22 minutes is normally I would start with trivia, but I've got a big wraparound opener for the show today. So without calling it the weave, I'll call it the weave. Okay, so just let's go. It takes 22 minutes for me to get to my son's school if everything goes perfectly. So if the traffic is good, if there's nothing on the road, if my car works, all that stuff, assuming everything goes perfectly, the fastest I can get from my house to my son's school is 22 minutes. Well, why do I know that? Well, if you have children in school, you know exactly why I know that because you've probably had the same internal monologue that I've had about that. If something happened to my son or happened at his school, how quickly could I get there? And what would I even do? These are conversations we have with ourselves every day, right? Yesterday, I had to test that theory. Probably about 11:30, got a phone call from the school that the school was in a preliminary lockdown. And so then by the time I had heard that news, it had been 30 minutes into the school lockdown. So when you start to do the math, you realize that it takes me 22 minutes. The lockdown had been happening for 30 minutes. By the time I could get to my son, assuming everything was right, it's 52 minutes. That is an earth shattering, heartbreaking amount of time to have to worry about and to realize that the 30 minutes when what has happened in the 30 minutes of time before I even knew what was going on with my son. What has happened? Where are they? What are they doing in the school classroom? All of those kinds of things. Now, this happened in the not North Las Vegas, but the northern part of Las Vegas. And what had basically happened was I think there was someone who attempted to rob a store or something like that, and they fled, and they ended up at an elementary school, not an elementary school, at the school next to my son's school. That person actually shot themselves in like the school football field, and it sounds like there was no situation where any students were injured, that sort of thing. But as I started to pull apart this conversation with my son, one of the things that there's a few things there, but number one, this was at 9:30 at night. I had been talking to him all day about it, and he came out of his room. It was 9:30 at night, and he started to tell me, when your 14-year-old comes out of the room at 9:30 at night, like I gotta pay attention. Something's going on here, right? So he's like, well, I was sitting in the class because I was asking him all day. I was like, what happened? Tell me about this. And I'll get to that in a second. But he's like, well, I was sitting there and I didn't even realize this till afterwards. But my teacher called her husband and she started crying on the phone with him while she was in the classroom with us while we were on lockdown. And, so I had to coach my son through this conversation of like, that is a very normal reaction to something like that, to be that emotional, to want to talk to someone that you love when your school is in lockdown. And I really had to take the time for him to pull apart and say like, hey, I hope you did not, I hope you did not, find yourself in conversation with other students about this. And I certainly hope that your peers were not giving your teacher a hard time or having a difficult conversation or making fun of her. I'm just being honest with you. I'm telling you the conversation. And because the way that she responded was very, very normal. And he's like, no, I know. And side note, I had found out that he actually emailed his teacher later and he was like, hey, thank you for everything you did. Good job. So super proud moment for me. But what I realized through all of that conversation is he said this to me. He said, it was my first lockdown. Like it was like school prom or some kind of holiday, some experience of life. And we have so normalized this behavior, this lockdown mentality, that it was inevitable. And if you're a parent, I think you also understand that inevitability. You understand the every time you send your kid to school, you do the same kind of math that you do in your head, but ultimately you don't know. Ultimately, you don't know. Like, what would you even do? What would you even do if you had to get there? You could get there in time. But the point is, as I was dissecting with him, like, what did you do during that time? What did you do during the lockdown? He's like, well, we went under the desk and we played cards, and I truly was astonished at how both he and his peers, they have done this sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a year. They practice for these lockdowns, and it is so normal. But if I'm being honest with you, they also train those kids. It's like, we're gonna do lockdown training. So they learn lockdown training. Lockdown equals sit down, go on your desk, any of this stuff, shut the doors, all that stuff. And it's not until like real moments of crisis that they really have to confront this. And what I mean to say by that, if you're following me on the weave here, is that at no point, even though there was a dangerous situation, was he really prepared for that dangerous situation. And the reason he wasn't prepared for that dangerous situation is we train our kids that this is just normal. Whereas his teacher, who's a little bit older, obviously, was confronted with that reality enough that she called her husband in the middle of class and was like, "We're in a lockdown," and apparently got emotional, apparently started crying, apparently started having a really difficult time. I don't have an answer to that right now. I don't have a solution, but it was my first time in that situation. And I am not the only parent. I know this happens every day in this country. And we are in a situation where we are so far from addressing this concern. We are so deeply intertwined with the chaos of everything, all of the shit that's happening in this country, that we can't even intelligently look at something like this and say, how can we stop this from happening? It's not a conversation that's happening in our country right now. And that is an insane thing. I had posted yesterday a conversation about how there's currently a queue of 30,000 people waiting to leave the United States and renounce their citizenship. And people from overseas, people from outside of the United States, for the first time were commenting and saying, "I don't understand how you live there. I don't. Your healthcare is so expensive. It's scary to me. You have to worry about people going to the grocery store with guns and shooting you. I can't imagine it." And so this idea of this great American hegemony is really being shattered, and it's shattering at a rapid pace, that I don't think that we're systemically ready for it. So I don't know what to say about what happened yesterday, but it is shocking to me how our children are numb to this. I remember exactly where I was during Columbine. I was in a hotel in Minot, North Dakota. It was like a nautically themed hotel. It was the weirdest hotel. There's this big, giant projection TV. This was way back. It was one of these giant projection TVs. We were there for this school trip, and we all just sat around this TV in the middle of the hotel lobby, and we watched what was happening in Columbine, and we were just stunned. And all of this time later, we are so, yeah. So why do I bring this up? Well, I bring this up because we find ourselves in a situation where our basic needs, our life, our energy, our food, our bills, our healthcare are constantly being ignored, and we are constantly asked to struggle and to struggle and to struggle. And I contrast that with what is happening in Utah right now with this Stratos data center. And the fact that I live close to Utah, the fact that the government of Utah and the United States of America is so willing to continue to give these billionaires whatever they want. Kevin O'Leary has been making the rounds about this data center. And the thing that amazes me is that I actually did listen to Kevin O'Leary debate Tucker Carlson. And first of all, I will say it is wild to me that Tucker Carlson is to the left of the entire Democratic Party, and Tucker Carlson is literally to the left of the Democratic Party on data centers. He's actively having conversations. He's actively talking about how it's going to destroy jobs, how it's bad for the environment. And now Tucker Carlson, of all people, is talking about how data centers are going to increase fossil fuel usage. This is insane. It's insane that the political trajectory. But my point is, when you listen to Kevin O'Leary is a great example of the billionaire leeching of the system, right? And his principal argument for the data center, why is it necessary for the data center? Well, if you listen to Kevin O'Leary talk, what he will say is the data centers are necessary for national security. We have to have the best data centers so that China does not get ahead of us, so that China does not outpace America. First of all, China has 385 data centers. We have over 4,000 data centers. But Kevin O'Leary is not a citizen of the United States of America. Kevin O'Leary is a citizen of Canada, Ireland, and the United Arab Emirates. So why is Kevin O'Leary lecturing us about our military and our national security? And why is Kevin O'Leary's supposed priority the military dominance of the United States of America when Kevin O'Leary is not even a citizen of the United States of America? And who are the people that are listening to this argument and saying, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." The absurdity of that, the preposterous nature of that is wild. And it's honestly insane. And then this conversation takes us down the line of the other conversations that we've been having. When you listen to Kevin O'Leary talk about data centers and people ask the question, well, why should the taxpayers be subsidizing you adding these data centers? Why should the taxpayer have to pay for you to come in, increase their electricity bills, increase their water bills, make it more difficult on the environment, make literally it's going to be 28 degrees hotter in the region when this data center is up and running. And someone like Kevin O'Leary will say, "Oh, this is just the way it is in capitalism. I'm not a bad person. I'm just playing the rules." But nobody is willing to ask the question, why are we doing it this way? Why are we not analyzing and looking at just because something has always been this way, just because capitalists have always been able to take advantage of municipalities, just because if they don't do it in your state, they will go to another state, does not mean that that is correct. That does not mean that that is the way forward that we have to go. We do not have to keep giving away our resources, our land, our energy, our children, our education systems, our healthcare, our environment, and our literal money just because a billionaire threatens us that they might move somewhere else. We have to stop with this playbook, this gaslighting and abuse from these billionaires. Because while our politicians are sort of pulling themselves over each other like crabs in a bucket, and that's exactly what they're doing, whether that's your municipal politicians or your governors or your congressional people, they're literally crabs in a bucket, pulling each other down and pulling you down with them, jumping over each other to try to get this next, stadium built or data center built or Amazon warehouse built. And they're doing it with diminishing returns. Well, we have to stop believing that the old way is working because we can clearly see that it's not. And while they're being the crabs in the bucket, trying to hoard themselves out to the next billionaire, your children go to school every day with the assumption from both your child, their teachers, and yourself that you're essentially gambling that nothing is going to happen to them that day. But let me close it out. Two things. Number one, in probably one of the most unlikely cities in the world that I thought this would happen, the citizens of Reno, Nevada, yesterday spent 7 hours at their community at a city council meeting, demanding that the city stop building data centers. As I said, 7 hours. 7 hours of their time they spent telling their city council. And we have seen time and time again where citizens will go to these municipalities and beg not to have the data center, and then they do it anyway. But for the first time, and honestly, surprisingly in Reno, they said no. They stopped the data centers. They put a 30-day moratorium on the data centers so that they can analyze what's happening and that they can find a better path forward. Now, we don't know if this is going to mean no more data centers in Reno, but we do know that this is a victory. And we have to stop pretending that we're not winning when we do win. So the citizens of Reno put their foot down. They stopped these data centers for 30 days. And guess what? Elections are happening right now. So the politicians in Reno have an enormous amount of pressure on them, and they will have to decide, well, am I gonna, give away everything to Kevin O'Leary, never get elected again, or am I gonna start listening? And the last part of it is, with everything that I just talked about, last night I had the very good fortune of attending an event for a gubernatorial candidate in Nevada. I always have to weigh like how I talk about these things and how I utilize my platform versus my constant desire to be independent. But what I would tell you is that when I went to, this was in Las Vegas, first of all, in order to get there, I had to drive through, I didn't have to. I ended up driving through a homeless encampment. And it was one of the worst displays of everything we just talked about. There were literally dozens and dozens of people in this homeless encampment living in extremely unsanitary conditions, literally camping themselves out between the divider lane of a road and underneath a bridge, underneath a major highway bridge, by the way. No one should have to live like that. And yet here we are openly discussing how it is that we're going to give away our resources again and again and again and again. And so it's not lost on me that as I was driving to this event for someone in political power, that I had to drive through. I keep saying had to. I'm sorry. I ended up driving through this homeless encampment. Well, when I got to this event with this incredible amount of like bad news, this incredible amount of like doom coming from the world, a lockdown at my son's school, I saw a room full of people who, against all odds, are coming together to support a candidate that they believe in, who are coming together in spite of odds, in spite of a political system working against them, in spite of the establishment of the Democratic Party essentially trying to squash their campaign. They're choosing to find hope. And if I'm being honest with you, I didn't particularly like, I do this thing a lot. It's easy for me now. I've learned how to do it, but in person, it's very uncomfortable for me. And I always have this sort of like umbrella over my head that's like, you see me on this phone, you see me on this computer, but the person you see in real life, it's not the same person. But I was greeted with just like enormous amount of kindness and positive energy. And it reminded me that there are, in fact, thousands, if not millions of people in this country, in this state, that want to push back, that want to do things to make their life better, to make your children's life better, and to make the world better. And it was a beautiful thing. It was an incredible way to cap out an incredibly chaotic day. And the number of things that had to happen for me to get there, I can't even begin to describe. So I have to believe that if you do what you are supposed to do in your life, if you gravitate towards the things that you're supposed to gravitate toward, doors will open up for you. That was a massive commentary for this morning. So yeah, good morning. Welcome to the Ignition News. If you're new to the show, please consider following us on your favorite podcast platform, Spotify, Apple News. Apple News, Apple Podcasts. We broadcast the show live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Other shows are uploaded to Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you want to catch up with the show, please do. It's important that you follow them. The reason I say that is that our social media and our news media is being heavily restricted. The podcast space remains one space where we can connect as truthfully as possible, and it remains relatively uncensored. So yeah, I do also want to let you know some future programming updates. Next week, we're going to have a special segment from one of our Rebel Radio community members as we expand the Ignition News and Rebel Radio, and candidly, as we take on more projects to push back against this wave of fascism. I think you're going to be excited to see not only other people participating, but I think you're going to be excited to see the impact that we're having. And as much as I wanted to talk about stories today, I did pull up stories. What I'm realizing is that sometimes you have to reflect. Today was supposed to be a news day. It ended up being a day of reflection. And what I would reflect on is this has been an exhausting 18 months. It has been a 18 months of highs and lows, but we are still here. I remember during the 2024 election, someone called me and I picked up the phone. It was a phone banker and a canvasser. And he's like, hey, this is so-and-so. I'm calling on behalf of Kamala Harris campaign, yada, yada, starts going to the spiel. And I was like, hey, it's okay. You don't have to sell me on this. We're good. And then said, hey, thank you very much for what you do. Thank you for doing this. It's important. Everything is on the line. You have to keep going. And he stopped dead in his tracks, and there was just silence on the other end of the phone, and he started crying. And I'm paraphrasing, and I don't want to share too much of what he said, but he was like, thank you. Like, all of the people I know are at risk. And so I said, keep going. You have to keep doing what you're doing. Well, we know what happened. We know where we are right now. but you have to keep going as well. We have to keep going. There are people who, even though we feel like we can resist sometimes, even when we get our ass kicked, there are people who don't at all feel like they can resist or push back. There are people whose rights have been taken from them and who continue to lose more and more rights every single day. I'll give you a quick overview of what I wanted to talk about today. Thematically, the first one is that the president has settled his tax situation with the IRS, purportedly creating a $1.7 billion slush fund of taxpayer money. It's not only probably unconstitutional, it's also probably illegal. The president is returning, I believe, now, or is set to return from China in what is basically the end of American hegemony. For the first time in history, a president of the United States sat in a room with the leader of China, and it was unclear who the actual leader of the world was. We have lost credibility on the world stage, but to see the president essentially suborn himself to Xi on the world stage, that he had to bring his little cartel of Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, and tech titans. I don't mean to be cruel when I say this, but did you ever participate in like mathalon or like a science fair or like a spelling bee or like a science project? And it was like one of those ones where it was like multiple schools. And then there was just like a school that came and they were just like clearly, they just weren't prepared to be there. That's us now on the world stage. We're the school that isn't prepared to be there. We're underfunded. We're prioritizing the wrong things. And now it shows. And the last part is we'll have to cover this story later. But when we talk about these billionaires, we talked about Kevin O'Leary obviously today. When you look at what's happening in New York City, we're starting to finally see a model of exactly the opposite. The opposite of the Kevin O'Leary, oh, you have to give me everything. If you don't give me everything, I'm going to leave. You have a mayor in New York City who's saying, pack your bags, baby. If you leave and you sell your house, that's just one more house that's available in a market that we already need housing in. Oh, you don't like being taxed? Tough shit. And we're seeing the disillusionment, the breakdown, the crumbling of this gaslighting of the billionaires that's, well, you have to give me everything or you're going to have nothing. And finally, you're starting to see with Mamdani, oh, we can balance the budget. We can provide more and more services to our taxpayers. If you pay money with taxes, you're going to get something back from your government. We're going to find and root out corruption. If the city employee or a county employee is doing something wrong, hold them accountable and fire them if we have to. No one is above the law, including the people who work for the government. We're going to start to find ways to take care of our homeless and unhoused population. We're going to start to find ways to clean up the literal streets. So yes, it is a lot. Yes, sometimes we have to analyze what path we have forward. But what I would tell you, and something I don't reflect on a lot, is the lesson that I learned last night. There are more people than you could possibly believe who think the way that you think. But just like I occasionally need, and you occasionally need, to find reinforcement, support, and rest, they need that as well. They need to know that they are not alone, just like you need to know that they are not alone and that you're not alone. So part of your responsibility in this time is to continue to lift other people up, to elevate their stories, to hold them up when they need to be held up. So part of what we're doing is not only resisting, but persisting, finding people and recognizing them. One of the things, and where I'll close out the show today, one of the things that I have really started to teach myself to do is to pour out support. It's just not something that's happened to me in my life, to be honest with you. No one ever trained me to pour out support. So I've had to train myself to find people. And I'm asking you to train yourself to do that as well, to find people and to over-index on telling them you're doing a good job, you're not alone, I saw what you did, it has an impact, and if you need anything, let me know. It's When you're constantly in the fire hose, which we are all in the fire hose all the time. When you're constantly in the fire hose of the billionaires and the politicians, and they're throwing everything at you. Sometimes you don't realize, like, oh, I'm still standing against all this, and you certainly aren't equipped for it. But sometimes you need to, like, push up the water a little bit for the person standing next to you and say, like, oh, hey, but hey, we're still fucking here. That's hilarious, right? So do that. That's the Ignition news. When I say Ignition news, today was more like the Ignition 22 minutes of commentary. We'll be back on Monday live. We broadcast the show live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Go ahead and find us over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You have a great day. This is May 15th, 2026. Stay lit. Yeah. It was the first time ever that Instagram didn't get shut down. It must have been karma. What's going on? Good stuff. Leave. Rather hilariously, the last time we did the show on Wednesday, I think it stayed broadcasting on YouTube for like 30 minutes. So, that's why I got to stop with the YouTube.